On September 22nd, 2006, a 16-year-old girl was home alone, house-sitting, watching movies. The lights went out. She stayed on the couch, still, quiet, waiting. A sound came from somewhere in the house. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. She called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Then, movement in the darkness. Two figures stepped forward from the shadows, masks hiding their faces, knives in their hands. And in that moment, she realizes she is not alone. September 22nd, 2006. It begins like any other day at Pocatello High School. Students move through the hallways, voices echoing between lockers, the quiet rhythm of a normal school day unfolding. Among them, Cassie Jo Stoddart. At her locker, she gathers her books, organizing her day like anyone else. Nothing about her stands out. Nothing feels out of place. Nearby, Brian Draper walks through the same hallway. He's carrying a camera. At the time, that isn't unusual. Brian films often. School, friends, everyday moments. It's something he's known for, an interest in filmmaking, particularly horror. Later that day, Cassie is with her boyfriend, Matt Beckham. They're talking with another classmate, Tori Adamczyk. It's casual, ordinary, but somewhere in that conversation, plans begin to form. That evening, Cassie will be staying at her aunt's house, a quiet home in the Whispering Cliffs area. She's house-sitting for the weekend. Tori is invited over. The plan sounds simple. They'll hang out, watch movies, spend time together like any group of teenagers would. Later that evening, Cassie arrived at her aunt and uncle's home in the Whispering Cliffs area. She wasn't alone. Her boyfriend, Matt Beckham, was with her. They had been dropped off by his mother. Inside, they settled onto the couch, the TV playing softly in the background. Just two teenagers spending time together. Around 7 p.m., there was a knock at the door. When they opened it, Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper were standing outside. They were invited in. Cassie and Matt gave them a brief tour of the house, moving from room to room, showing them where everything was. At one point, they went down into the basement, lingering near a weight machine, before eventually heading back upstairs. They returned to the couch and resumed watching movies as the night continued. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then, around 9 p.m., Brian and Tori said they had to leave. They explained they were going to the movie theater to see a film called Pulse. They said their goodbyes and left the house. Not long after, the lights went out. The house fell into darkness. Then, a sound from downstairs, glass breaking. The dog reacted immediately, barking toward the basement. Matt grew uneasy. He called his mother and asked if he could stay the night. She said no, but offered for Cassie to come stay at their house instead. Cassie refused. She said she needed to stay. A short time later, the lights flickered back on. Everything appeared normal again. At approximately 11 p.m., Matt's mother arrived, and he left the house. And just like that, Cassie was alone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The TV continued to play, casting shifting light across the walls. Time passed. Slowly. Then, once again, the lights went out. Darkness settled over the house. Cassie stayed on the couch. She did not move. She listened, the silence pressing in around her. Then, footsteps, faint at first, somewhere deeper in the house. Not outside. Inside. She called out, "Hello?" No answer. Only the sound getting closer. A shift in the darkness. Movement where there shouldn't be any. Then, From the shadows, two figures emerged, masks hiding their faces, knives in hand. They moved toward her, closing the distance quickly. Before she could react, they rushed forward, forcing her off the couch and down to the floor. She struggled, trying to pull away, but they kept her pinned. They slashed repeatedly, swing after swing after swing, until she stopped moving. Cassie Jo Stoddart was killed. In the earliest stages of the investigation, detectives worked outward from the scene. As with many cases, attention first turned to those closest to Cassie. One of the first individuals considered was her stepfather. It was standard procedure, someone with a personal connection, someone who knew the home. But as investigators examined the details, that possibility quickly began to fall apart. There was no evidence placing him at the scene that night, no signs of involvement, and his timeline was confirmed. He was cleared. Attention then shifted to the last person known to be with Cassie that night, her boyfriend, Matt Beckham. Matt had been at the house with her and had left just before the attack, making him a critical part of the timeline. He was brought in for questioning. Investigators noted his demeanor. He appeared calm, cooperative. Some would later describe it as almost too calm, but Matt did not hesitate to speak with police. He agreed to a polygraph examination, answered every question, and the results showed no signs of deception. With no evidence tying him to the crime, Matt Beckham was cleared. Investigators were once again left without a clear suspect. But that was about to change. Investigators soon turned their attention back to two names that had already come up: Tori Adamczyk and Brian Draper. Tori was the first to be questioned, interviewed at his home. He told detectives that after leaving Cassie's house, he and Brian went to see a movie, then returned to his house afterward. It was a simple story, and at first, police didn't have a reason to challenge it. Brian was brought in next. He gave the same account, leaving the house, going to the movie, nothing unusual. But this time, something didn't sit right. Detectives began to press for details. They asked about the movie, what it was about, what he remembered. Brian hesitated, struggled, then finally said, "I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention." That answer raised concerns. Detectives pushed further. The story began to shift. Eventually, Brian admitted he hadn't been truthful. He claimed that instead of going to a movie, he and Tori had been breaking into cars. He said he was too scared to admit it at first, because it was a crime. But again, the details didn't hold. Detectives asked which cars, where exactly, said they could check for fingerprints. Brian's answers became scattered, inconsistent. At one point, he said he had been wearing gloves. When Tori was questioned again, he backed up that version of events. Still, something wasn't adding up. Brian agreed to take a polygraph test, but just before it began, he asked to speak to detectives again. That's when everything changed. Brian broke down. He told them the story about the movie wasn't true. He said they never really left. Instead, he and Tori had stayed near the house, hiding, waiting. They had gone back inside, trying to scare Cassie and Matt, turning off the lights, breaking glass in the basement to lure them downstairs. When that didn't work, they waited again. They stayed hidden until Matt left. Then, they turned off the lights one more time. Brian said Tori put on a mask and went upstairs. He followed. According to Brian, Tori was the one who initiated the attack. Brian claimed he didn't physically harm Cassie, and said Tori had threatened him, warning that if he told anyone, he would be killed too. During the confession, Brian showed visible emotion. He expressed regret, apologizing for what had happened and for his role in it. At one point, even after questioning paused and the recording continued, he could be heard breaking down, apologizing to Cassie, saying he was going to stop Tori. Then, he offered something more. He told investigators he could take them to where they had hidden the evidence. This was a major breakthrough. Brian led authorities to a remote area. There, they recovered multiple items: Halloween masks, knives, clothing, and a videotape. With this new evidence, investigators proceeded carefully, especially with the tape. When they reviewed it, what they found added an entirely new layer to the case. The footage showed Brian and Tori filming themselves, talking, planning, referencing horror films, specifically Scream. They spoke about killing someone, about choosing a victim. At one point, they identified Cassie as that victim.
I'm sorry, Cassie's family. She had me move on.
The recordings captured more than just planning. They showed the laid up, the drive to the house, and even their reactions afterward.
Just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a joke.
And contrary to Brian's earlier claims, the footage suggested something different. It didn't show one dominant figure and one passive participant. It showed two individuals, equally involved. Just 3 hours after Brian's confession, detectives brought Tori in again. This time, they were hoping for the same outcome, a full admission. But Tori held to the story. The break-ins, the cars. He didn't confess. The interview came to an end. But before it did, detectives made it clear he was being placed under arrest for first-degree murder. In 2007, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk stood trial, each facing charges of first-degree murder. The prosecution's case was direct. This was not impulsive. It was planned. They pointed to the recordings, the conversations, the preparation, and the actions that followed. The videotapes became central to the case. Jurors were shown footage of the two defendants speaking openly, discussing their intentions, referencing horror films, and outlining what they were going to do. It was evidence that went beyond the crime scene. It showed thought, anticipation, decisions made before that night ever began. The defense presented a different narrative. For Brian Draper, the focus was on influence, that he had followed Tori's lead and was not the one in control. For Tori Adamczyk, the approach was more restrained, offering less explanation and less admission. Two defendants, two narratives. But the prosecution returned to a single point. The evidence did not separate them. It connected them. The planning, the presence, the actions inside the house, all of it shared. As the trial went on, the weight of that evidence became difficult to ignore. The recordings, the inconsistencies, the confession. After deliberation, the jury reached a decision. Both Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk were found guilty of first-degree murder. In the end, the case left behind more than a verdict. It forced a closer look at how something like this could be planned, discussed, and carried out by two people who, on the surface, appeared no different from those around them. The recordings, the conversations, the preparation, it all pointed to a level of intent that went beyond impulse. And even with everything laid out in court, the question of why never fully settled into a clear answer. In the years since, both Draper and Adamczyk have remained in prison, each serving sentences of 30 years to life. Appeals have been filed, sentences reviewed, but the convictions have remained in place. Time has moved forward, but the case continues to be revisited, not just for what happened, but for what it revealed. And at the center of it all is Cassie Jo Stoddart, whose life ended that night, and whose story remains the reason this case is remembered.